Maya Thompson's pen slipped from her fingers for the third time in 10 minutes. The lecture hall felt like a sauna despite the air conditioning running at full blast. Professor Williams continued his explanation of quantum entanglement as if the universe depended on every word he spoke. Maya glanced at the clock on the wall and groaned silently when she realized only 15 minutes had passed since she last checked. The Tuesday afternoon physics class stretched endlessly before her. Maya had chosen this course thinking it would be interesting, but after 3 months of complex equations and theoretical discussions that seemed to have no connection to real life, she questioned her decision daily. Her notebook contained more doodles than actual notes, and her mind wandered to her shift at the campus coffee shop later that evening. Around her, other students showed varying degrees of attention. Some furiously scribbled notes while others openly dozed with their heads propped on their hands. Maya fell somewhere in the middle, occasionally catching fragments of the lecture but mostly thinking about her upcoming midterm exam and whether she would pass this class. The monotonous drone of the professor's voice created a hypnotic effect. Maya's eyelids grew heavy as she struggled to focus on the whiteboard covered in equations that looked like ancient hieroglyphs. She pinched herself awake and took a sip from her water bottle, determined to at least pretend she was paying attention. Outside, the windows, the autumn afternoon, painted the campus in golden hues. Maya watched leaves drift past the glass and imagined herself anywhere but in this stuffy lecture hall. She thought about her plans for the weekend, her part-time job serving coffee to stressed students, and her uncertain future after graduation. At 19, everything felt both urgent and impossibly distant. Professor Williams turned from the whiteboard and began discussing the practical applications of quantum mechanics in modern technology. Maya perked up slightly, hoping for something that might actually relate to the real world. She picked up her pen again and prepared to take notes when the impossible happened. The reinforced windows exploded inward without warning. Glass shards flew through the air like deadly confetti as something metallic and gleaming crashed through the opening. Students screamed and dove under their desks as debris rained down on the lecture hall. The fire alarm began its piercing wail, adding to the chaos and confusion. Maya found herself frozen in her seat, watching in stunned disbelief as a sleek, crystalline object roughly the size of a small car came to rest near the front of the classroom. The thing pulsed with an inner light that seemed to shift between blue and silver. Its surface appeared smooth as glass but somehow organic at the same time. Professor Williams had disappeared, probably fleeing through the rear exit along with most of the other students. Maya could hear shouts and running footsteps in the hallway, but she remained transfixed by the impossible sight before her. The object's surface began to shimmer, and then something even more incredible happened. A section of the crystalline hull dissolved like morning mist, revealing an opening. From within emerged a being that defied every assumption Maya had ever made about life in the universe. The creature stood nearly 7 feet tall with limbs that seemed too long and graceful for its frame. Its skin had the appearance of polished obsidian, dark and smooth, with an inner radiance that reminded Maya of stars, reflected in still water. The being's eyes burned with an inner fire that seemed both ancient and desperately urgent. It moved with purpose despite obvious injuries, dark fluid seeping from wounds along its torso. As it stepped fully into the lecture hall, Maya noticed its breathing was labored and its movements increasingly unsteady. The alien creature surveyed the room. With those burning eyes before its gaze settled on Maya, she felt a jolt of recognition, though she had never seen anything like this being in her life. Something in its expression conveyed intelligence, pain, and, most surprisingly, hope. The being approached her with faltering steps, each movement clearly causing it significant pain. Maya wanted to run, to scream, to do anything other than sit frozen in her chair, but her body refused to respond. The creature stopped directly in front of her desk and extended one long, elegant hand. In its palm lay a small device that pulsed with the same inner light as the ship. The object was roughly the size of a smartphone, but appeared to be made from the same crystalline material as the vessel. Intricate patterns covered its surface, shifting and flowing like living circuit boards. The alien being spoke, and impossibly, Maya understood every word despite never hearing the language before. Its voice resonated with harmonics that seemed to bypass her ears and speak directly to her mind. "The knowledge of my people," the being whispered with obvious effort. "Keep it safe. They must not have it." Before Maya could respond or even process what was happening, the creature pressed the device into her hands. The moment her fingers touched its surface, she felt a strange tingling sensation as if electricity was flowing through her skin. The device felt warm and somehow alive. The alien being smiled, an expression that seemed both sad and grateful. "You will understand," it said softly. "When the time comes, you will know what to do." The creature stepped back and began to glow, with the same inner light that had emanated from its ship. The radiance grew brighter and brighter until Maya had to shield her eyes. When the light faded, nothing remained of the being except tiny particles that drifted in the air like glowing dust, before disappearing entirely. Maya sat alone in the destroyed lecture hall, clutching the alien device in her trembling hands. The fire alarm continued its relentless shrieking, and she could hear emergency sirens approaching from outside. Students and faculty shouted to each other in the hallways, their voices filled with panic and confusion. She looked down at the device. In her hands, it continued to pulse with that inner light, and the patterns on its surface seemed to respond to her touch. Without understanding why, Maya slipped the object into her backpack. Just as the first emergency responders burst through the rear doors of the lecture hall, as paramedics and firefighters swarmed the room, Maya realized that her ordinary Tuesday afternoon had become something else entirely. The device hidden in her backpack seemed to whisper with possibilities she could not yet comprehend, and she knew with absolute certainty that her life as an unremarkable college student had ended. Forever. 3 days had passed since Maya last slept properly. Each time she closed her eyes, strange dreams filled her mind with images of distant stars and impossible technologies. She sat in her dorm room staring at the alien device which had not stopped pulsing since she brought it home. Her roommate had gone to stay with friends after Maya claimed she was coming down with the flu. The official story on the news described the incident as a meteorite impact with unusual mineral properties. Maya watched the reports with growing unease as government officials explained away the impossible with carefully crafted lies. No mention was made of the alien being or its final words to her. Maya had tried to research similar incidents online, but found only conspiracy theories and science fiction stories. She considered contacting the authorities multiple times, but something deep in her gut warned against it. The alien's final words echoed in her memory with increasing urgency. On Wednesday night, exhaustion finally overcame her anxiety. Maya fell asleep at her desk with the device resting in her open palm. In her dreams, she found herself standing in vast libraries filled with knowledge beyond human comprehension. Crystalline structures towered around her, each one containing the accumulated wisdom of entire civilizations. She woke to find the device had somehow attached itself to her skin. Thin tendrils of light connected the object to points along her arm, and Maya felt a strange warmth spreading through her body. Instead of panic, she experienced an overwhelming sense of completeness, as if she had been missing an essential part of herself her entire life. Knowledge flooded her consciousness like water through a broken dam. Star charts filled her vision, showing the locations of thousands of inhabited worlds scattered across the galaxy. She understood the political structures of vast interstellar civilizations, their histories, their conflicts, and their hopes for the future. Maya learned about the Dominion, a tyrannical empire that had conquered most of the known galaxy through superior technology and ruthless efficiency. Their philosophy centered on the belief that only the strongest deserved to survive, and they had spent millennia proving this point by crushing anyone who opposed them. The being who had died in her lecture hall belonged to the collective, an alliance of free worlds that represented the last organized resistance against Dominion rule. For generations, they had fought a losing battle against overwhelming odds. Watching their member worlds fall one by one to the Empire's relentless expansion, the device Maya now carried contained the complete military and technological archives of the collective. Every weapon design, every defensive strategy, every secret base location, and most importantly, the coordinates of refugee worlds where billions of displaced beings had found sanctuary. In the wrong hands, this information would spell the end of freedom in the galaxy. Maya understood why the dying warrior had entrusted her with such responsibility. Earth sat at a crucial crossroads between dominion and collective territory, making it an ideal staging ground for either side. The planet's location could serve as a launching point for the final assault on the remaining free worlds, or as a rallying point for one last desperate stand against tyranny. The knowledge integration process took most of Thursday morning. Maya felt like she was downloading the contents of every library that had ever existed directly into her brain. Languages she had never heard became as familiar as English. Scientific principles that had puzzled human researchers for decades seemed as simple as basic arithmetic. When the process finally completed, Maya sat in her dorm room with tears streaming down her face. The weight of responsibility felt crushing. She was just a 19-year-old college student who had trouble passing her physics class, and now the fate of entire civilizations rested on her shoulders. She tried to return to normal activities, attending her Friday morning literature class and pretending nothing had changed. But during the lecture on modern poetry, Professor Anderson's words seemed to shift and distort. Maya blinked hard and saw the teacher's human appearance flicker like a broken television signal. Underneath, the illusion stood something reptilian with scaled skin and predatory yellow eyes. The creature wore human form like an ill-fitting costume, and Maya realized with growing horror that she was looking at a Dominion infiltrator. Professor Anderson's gaze locked onto Maya, and his false human smile became something cold and calculating. After class, he approached her desk with casual friendliness that felt anything but casual. "Miss Thompson," he said in his familiar voice, though Maya now heard the subtle harmonics underneath that marked him as non-human. "I was hoping we could discuss your recent absence from classes. You seem distracted lately." Maya gathered her books with forced calm while her newly enhanced mind raced through possible responses. The professor's eyes never left her face, and she could sense him probing for any sign that she knew his true nature. "I've been feeling under the weather," Maya replied carefully. "Nothing serious." Professor Anderson nodded with false concern. "Perhaps you should visit the campus health center. Sometimes students need extra attention when they're carrying heavy burdens." The emphasis on his final words sent ice through Maya's veins. He knew. Somehow, the Dominion had identified her as the recipient of the collective device, and now they were closing in. Maya excused herself and walked calmly toward the exit, fighting every instinct that screamed at her to run. She could feel the professor's inhuman gaze following her every step. Once she reached the hallway, she allowed herself to move faster, but not fast enough to appear panicked. Her enhanced knowledge provided options she would never have considered before. The chemistry lab on the second floor contained materials that could be combined to create a basic plasma cutter. The physics department had equipment that could be modified into defensive shields. Even the cafeteria's microwave ovens could be converted into directed energy weapons with the right modifications. Maya realized that her ordinary human life was over. The government agencies she might have trusted were clearly compromised by Dominion infiltrators. She was alone with knowledge that could save or damn billions of lives, hunted by enemies with technology far beyond anything Earth could produce. But as she walked across campus trying to formulate a survival plan, Maya began to understand something the aliens might have overlooked. Humans had spent their entire history facing impossible odds and finding ways to win anyway. They adapted, improvised, and refused to give up even when logic suggested surrender was the only rational choice. The alien knowledge in her head was vast and sophisticated, but it followed predictable patterns developed by civilizations that had grown comfortable with their technological superiority. Maya's human perspective saw gaps and opportunities that the original designers had never considered. She might be just an ordinary college student, but she was an ordinary human college student. and that, Maya began to suspect, might make all the difference. The abandoned subway tunnels beneath the city provided Maya with the perfect hiding place while she planned her next move. Urban explorers had mapped these forgotten passages years ago, but the city government ignored them as long as nobody caused trouble. Maya had discovered the entrance through a maintenance door in the university's basement, and now she lived in the darkness with only her stolen knowledge for company. 2 weeks had passed since her encounter with the disguised professor. Maya had watched from the shadows as more faculty members revealed their true natures, their human disguises becoming increasingly difficult to maintain as some kind of deadline approached. The infiltration ran deeper than she had imagined, with aliens embedded throughout the university administration and probably the local government as well. Maya spent her days scavenging materials from construction sites and electronic stores. The alien knowledge in her head provided blueprints for technologies that should have been impossible to build with Earth materials, but human ingenuity found ways to make them work anyway. A discarded car battery became a power source for energy. Shields. Copper wire from abandoned buildings formed the basis for communication jammers. Her first successful creation was a scanner that could detect Dominion infiltrators by analyzing their biosignatures. The device looked like a modified smartphone, but it could see through the aliens' disguises and identify their true forms. Maya tested it on campus from a safe distance and discovered the invasion was far more extensive than she had feared. The breakthrough came when she encountered Tom Riley, a computer science major she vaguely remembered from freshman orientation. Tom had been working late in the computer lab when he witnessed Professor Anderson's transformation from human to reptilian form. The terrified student had been hiding in the server room for 3 days, surviving on vending machine snacks and trying to convince himself he had hallucinated the entire experience. Maya found Tom trying to hack into government databases, searching for evidence of the alien presence. His programming skills were impressive, but his approach was hopelessly naive. Maya approached him carefully, using her scanner to confirm he was fully human before revealing herself. "You saw Professor Anderson change," Maya said softly as she emerged from the shadows of the computer lab. Tom spun around in his chair, nearly falling over in surprise. "Maya Thompson from physics class," he said with obvious relief. "I thought I was going crazy. Did you see it too?" Maya nodded and showed him the scanner device. "They're everywhere, Tom. The university, the government, probably the military. We're dealing with an invasion that's been planned for years." Together, they began building a resistance network from the most unlikely materials. Tom's programming expertise combined with Maya's alien knowledge created software that could hack Dominion communication systems. They discovered the invaders were using quantum encryption methods that human computers should not have been able to break. But Tom found vulnerabilities by approaching the problem from angles the aliens had never considered. Their third recruit was Alex Chun, a former military cadet who had been expelled from the academy for insubordination. Alex had been working as a security guard at a downtown office building when she noticed strange patterns in the emergency service responses. Too many incidents involved personnel who moved wrong, spoke wrong, and had eyes that reflected light. Like an animal's, Alex brought practical combat knowledge to their growing cell. She taught Maya and Tom how to move silently, how to disable security systems, and most importantly, how to think tactically instead of just reacting to threats. The alien knowledge provided advanced weapon designs, but Alex showed them how to implement those designs using materials from hardware. Stores and electronics shops. Their first major success came when they intercepted a Dominion communication describing the planned invasion timeline. The aliens intended to reveal themselves within 2 months, once their infiltration network had compromised all major world governments. Earth's military forces would be neutralized before they could mount any meaningful resistance. Maya realized they needed to warn humanity, but traditional communication channels were monitored or controlled by infiltrators. Instead, she devised a plan that combined alien technology with human creativity in ways the Dominion would never expect, using Tom's hacking skills. They accessed the emergency broadcast systems of major television networks. But instead of transmitting, A message that would be dismissed as a hoax, Maya created a demonstration that could not be ignored. She built a device that could temporarily disrupt the Dominion infiltrators' disguise generators, revealing their true forms to any camera or human eye within a specific radius on a busy Tuesday afternoon. Maya activated the device during a live news broadcast from the university campus. Across the nation, television viewers watched in horror as respected professors and administrators transformed before their eyes into reptilian creatures with scaled skin and burning yellow eyes. The footage spread across social media faster than any government agency could contain it. The Dominion response was swift and brutal. Within hours, their ships appeared in Earth's skies, massive black vessels that blocked out the sun above major cities. Instead of maintaining their infiltration timeline, the aliens had been forced into open warfare. Decades before their invasion was supposed to begin, Maya watched the ships arrive from her hidden base in the subway tunnels, feeling a mixture of terror and grim satisfaction. The element of surprise was gone, but now humanity at least knew what they were fighting against. The alien knowledge in her head provided technical specifications for the Dominion vessels, revealing weaknesses that could be exploited by determined humans with limited resources. Alex had already begun modifying their equipment for guerrilla warfare. The same plasma cutters they had built for laboratory work could be reconfigured as weapons. The communication jammers could disrupt Dominion coordination systems. Most importantly, the energy shield generators could protect human fighters from the aliens' superior firepower long enough to strike back. Tom worked frantically to establish contact with other resistance cells that were forming around the world. The disruption device had revealed infiltrators everywhere, sparking spontaneous uprisings in dozens of countries. Most of these groups lacked the alien knowledge that Maya possessed, but they brought something equally valuable: the desperate determination of a species that refused to surrender. Maya found herself becoming the coordinator for a global resistance network that operated on principles no alien civilization had ever encountered. Instead of rigid military hierarchies, human cells formed organic networks that adapted and evolved based on local conditions. When one group was destroyed, others learned from their mistakes and developed new tactics. The Dominion had expected to face a centralized military response that could be neutralized by eliminating key leadership targets. Instead, they found themselves fighting millions of independent cells that shared information freely and constantly innovated new approaches to asymmetric warfare. Maya's role evolved from frightened college student to strategic coordinator for humanity's survival. She spent her days analyzing Dominion tactics and developing countermeasures, while her nights were occupied with training new recruits and establishing supply lines for resistance equipment. The aliens had superior technology and overwhelming firepower, but they had never faced an enemy like humanity. Each defeat taught the humans valuable lessons, while each victory revealed new weaknesses in the Dominion's seemingly invincible war machine. Maya realized that the dying alien warrior had chosen his successor well, not because humans were stronger or smarter than other species, but because they were stubborn enough to keep fighting even when victory seemed impossible, and creative enough to find solutions that more advanced civilizations would never consider. 6 months after the Dominion ships first darkened Earth's skies, Maya no longer resembled the sleepy college student who had once dozed through physics lectures. Living underground had hardened her body while coordinating a global resistance, had sharpened her mind into something the aliens had never encountered before. The device that had once seemed foreign now felt like an extension of her own thoughts. Its knowledge seamlessly integrated with human intuition and creativity. The war had transformed the entire planet into a battlefield. Major cities lay in ruins, their skylines dominated by the black towers the Dominion used as command centers. But in the rubble and shadows, humanity had learned to fight back with weapons that defied every principle of civilized warfare. Maya stood in what had once been the New York subway system, now converted into a massive underground factory. Human workers operated alongside jury-rigged alien technology, producing equipment that should have been impossible with Earth's industrial base. A modified assembly line created plasma rifles from salvaged car parts, while another section built personal force fields using materials scavenged from destroyed shopping malls. Tom had evolved into the Resistance's primary intelligence coordinator, his computer skills enhanced by alien communication protocols that he had learned to manipulate in ways their original designers never intended. His latest creation was a virus that could infiltrate Dominion command networks by mimicking the neural patterns of their organic components. The beautiful thing about their technology, Tom explained to a group of new recruits, is that it's too sophisticated for its own good. They built systems that can think and adapt, but they never considered that someone might teach those systems to think differently. Alex had become Maya's tactical advisor, combining military training with hard-earned experience fighting an enemy that possessed overwhelming technological superiority. She had developed new combat doctrines based on the principle that humans could win any fight if they were willing to be more creative and more desperate than their opponents. The aliens fight like they're playing chess, Alex told her trainees during a weapons demonstration. Every move is calculated, every strategy follows established patterns. But humans don't play chess when we're fighting for survival. We flip the board over and beat our opponent with the pieces. The resistance had grown from Maya's small cell into a global network of millions. Each group adapted the basic technologies to their local resources and needs. Farmers in the Midwest converted their tractors into anti-aircraft platforms using gravity manipulation principles. Factory workers in Detroit built powered armor from industrial equipment. Even children contributed by creating communication networks that the aliens could not intercept or decode. Maya's greatest challenge came when the Dominion deployed their subjugation fleet, an armada of vessels that had never failed to crush planetary resistance. The massive ships arrived with great ceremony, their commanders confident that Earth would surrender within days once faced with truly overwhelming force. The fleet's flagship established orbit directly above the ruins of New York. Its commander, broadcasting surrender demands in hundreds of Earth languages. Maya listened to the transmission from her underground command center, studying the tactical data that Tom's infiltration programs had gathered about the vessel's capabilities. They want us to meet them in open battle, Maya said to her core team. Ship to ship, army to army, following all the established rules of interstellar warfare. Alex grinned with the expression of someone who had spent months learning to think like a human instead of a soldier. So we do exactly the opposite. Maya's plan was so audacious that even her own people initially thought she had lost her mind. Instead of trying to match the Dominion's military might, she intended to exploit the one weakness that their advanced technology could not overcome, its dependence on predictable logical patterns. The aliens had spent millennia refining their combat algorithms to counter every known form of military strategy. Their artificial intelligence systems could predict and neutralize threats from any civilized species in the galaxy, but they had never encountered an enemy that deliberately chose chaos over order, creativity over logic, and impossible solutions over rational ones. Maya's strike team consisted of 12 volunteers, each carrying equipment that violated every principle of sound military planning. Their weapons were improvised from materials that should not have been compatible. Their armor was built from specifications that alien engineers would have dismissed as theoretical impossibilities. Most importantly, their tactical approach was based on pure human instinct rather than any established doctrine. They infiltrated the flagship using a delivery shuttle that had been disguised as a garbage scow. The ship's advanced sensors detected the vessel's approach but classified it as harmless debris. Unable to conceive that any military force would use such an undignified infiltration method, once aboard, Maya's team split up and began implementing a plan that had no backup options and no room for retreat. Each person carried a small device that Tom had designed to interface directly with the ship's central computer. But instead of trying to hack the system using conventional methods, they intended to teach it to think like a human. Maya reached the command center first. moving through corridors that had been designed to intimidate conquered populations with their alien grandeur. The bridge was a vast space filled with crystalline displays and organic-looking control surfaces that pulsed with inner light. At its center stood the fleet commander, a being whose presence radiated authority and contempt for the primitive world below. The alien turned as Maya entered, its four eyes regarding her with the kind of casual indifference reserved for insects. "You are the human who has caused so much trouble," it said in perfect English. "Your resistance ends here." Maya activated Tom's device and felt it interface with the ship's computer systems. Around her, the crystalline displays began to flicker, as human logic patterns flooded into processing cores that had never encountered such chaotic input. The ship's artificial intelligence, designed to handle complex military calculations with perfect efficiency, suddenly found itself trying to process equations that had no solutions and strategies that defied all logical analysis. "You're right," Maya replied as alarms began sounding throughout the ship. "The resistance ends here, but not the way you think." The virus that Tom had created was not designed to destroy the ship's systems, but to transform them. Every circuit, every processor, every artificial intelligence core began thinking in patterns that prioritized adaptability over efficiency, creativity over logic, and stubborn determination over rational analysis. The effects spread throughout the subjugation fleet as each ship's computer systems learned new ways of processing information. Instead of coordinating their attacks with mechanical precision, the vessels began operating with the chaotic unpredictability that characterized human decision-making. Maya's team escaped in the confusion as the flagship's own defensive systems began targeting other Dominion vessels, their newly humanized artificial intelligence interpreting the fleet's rigid formation as a threat to tactical flexibility. Within hours, the most powerful military force in the galaxy had effectively neutralized itself through friendly fire and conflicting orders. The victory sent shockwaves across the galaxy as news of humanity's impossible triumph reached the scattered remnants of the collective. For the first time in generations, the refugees on distant worlds began to hope that freedom might be more than just a memory. Maya returned to her underground command center to find messages flooding in from across the galaxy. Other oppressed worlds were beginning to adopt human tactics, adapting them for their own species and environments. The rigid doctrines that had dominated galactic warfare for eons were crumbling in the face of human unpredictability, but Maya knew the war was far from over. The Dominion still controlled most of the galaxy, and they would not make the same mistakes twice. However, humanity had proven something that no other species had managed. The Empire was not invincible. More importantly, they had shown the galaxy a new way of fighting, one that valued innovation over tradition and refused to accept defeat as inevitable. The tide had turned, and for the first time since the invasion began, Maya allowed herself to believe that humanity might actually win. The war ended not with a final battle, but with a cascade of surrenders that swept across the galaxy like a tide. Maya watched the reports coming in from worlds she had only known as coordinates in the alien device, each one telling the same impossible story. The Dominion was collapsing under the weight of its own rigid thinking. Maya now stood in what had once been the United Nations building, its damaged walls rebuilt with a combination of human architecture and collective technology. At 20 years old, she had become Earth's unofficial ambassador to a galaxy that was learning to respect humanity's unique approach to problem-solving. The transformation had begun with the subjugation fleet's defeat, but it had accelerated far beyond anything Maya could have imagined. The tactical innovations that human resistance cells had developed were being adopted by liberation movements on hundreds of worlds. Each species adapted the basic principles to their own strengths and circumstances, creating a wave of successful rebellions that the Dominion could not contain. Tom had established a galactic communication network that operated on principles of organized chaos, routing messages through pathways that changed constantly to avoid detection. The system defied every established rule of efficient data transmission, but it worked precisely because it was too unpredictable for the Dominion's surveillance systems to track. The beautiful thing about human thinking, Tom explained to a gathering of refugee leaders, is that we don't just solve problems. We solve them in ways that create new problems for our enemies. Alex had become the military advisor for a dozen liberated worlds, teaching their forces how to fight asymmetric campaigns against technologically superior opponents. Her greatest innovation was the concept of tactical unpredictability, where military units deliberately chose the least logical course of action in any given situation. Logic is predictable, Alex told her alien students during a strategy session, and predictable tactics get you killed when your enemy has better technology. But if you do something that makes no sense, they can't prepare for it because their computers can't calculate what crazy thing you'll do next. The collective had reformed as something entirely new, no longer a desperate alliance of refugees, but a thriving confederation of worlds that celebrated diversity of thought rather than uniformity of action. Earth had been welcomed not as a junior member seeking protection, but as an equal partner bringing unique perspectives to galactic civilization. Maya found herself addressing the reformed Galactic Council, a body that now included representatives from species that had been enslaved by the Dominion for generations. The chamber where she spoke had been designed to accommodate beings from dozens of different worlds, with atmospheric controls and gravity fields adjusted for each delegation's needs. "We didn't win this war through superior technology," Maya said as her words were translated into hundreds of languages and communication methods. "We won because we refused to accept that victory was impossible. Every species in this galaxy has that same potential for creative problem solving, but most of you forgot how to use it." The former Dominion worlds were undergoing their own transformations. As populations that had lived under authoritarian rule for generations learned to think independently, many struggled with the concept of organized chaos that had become humanity's signature contribution to galactic culture, but others embraced it with enthusiasm that surprised their former oppressors. Maya's greatest challenge came not from military threats, but from the responsibility of helping to build a new galactic order that could prevent another Dominion from rising in the future. The solution required combining the best aspects of human adaptability with the wisdom and experience of older civilizations. The Institute for Interspecies Innovation became Maya's most ambitious project, a research facility where beings from across the galaxy worked together to push the boundaries of what was possible. The Institute's headquarters occupied the same campus where Maya had once struggled through physics lectures, but the sleepy university had been transformed into a hub of galactic learning. Maya often returned to the lecture hall where her journey had begun, now converted into a memorial for the unknown warrior whose sacrifice had changed the course of galactic history. The room had been preserved exactly as it was on that Tuesday afternoon when the impossible became reality. Complete with Maya's old desk and the scorch marks from the crashed ship, students from dozens of worlds attended classes in the rebuilt university, learning not just scientific principles but new ways of approaching problems that their species had never considered. Human professors worked alongside alien researchers, creating hybrid disciplines that combined logical analysis with creative intuition. The curriculum included courses in applied chaos theory, where students learned to find order within seemingly random systems. Tactical unpredictability had become a required subject for military officers from allied worlds. Most popular of all was human problem-solving methodology, which taught the art of finding solutions that worked despite violating established principles. Maya's former physics professor, the real Dr. Williams, who had returned after the Dominion infiltrator was exposed, often joked that his most important contribution to the war effort had been boring Maya so thoroughly that she was ready for anything more exciting. "If I had known that putting a student to sleep in my quantum mechanics class would lead to galactic liberation," he said during a faculty meeting, "I would have made my lectures even more tedious." The reformed galaxy still faced challenges, but they were the problems of growth and cooperation rather than survival and oppression. Trade routes that had been controlled by the Dominion became open pathways for cultural and intellectual exchange. Refugee populations returned to their homeworlds, or chose to build new lives on planets that welcomed their contributions. Maya's personal life had also undergone transformation. The shy college student who once worried about passing her midterms had become a confident leader who helped shape policy for billions of beings. But she still enjoyed simple pleasures like serving coffee to stressed students, though now those students came from star systems she had helped liberate. The alien device that had started her journey no longer felt foreign in her thoughts. Its knowledge had become part of her, combined with human intuition to create something neither species could have achieved alone. Maya understood now that the dying warrior had not just given her information, but had shown her how different approaches to problem-solving could complement each other. The war against the Dominion had ended, but Maya knew that the real work was just beginning. Building a galactic civilization based on cooperation instead of conquest would require all the creativity and stubborn determination that humanity could provide, along with the wisdom and experience that older species brought to the partnership. Maya stood at her old desk in the memorial lecture hall, looking out through windows that had been repaired with transparent materials that could survive starship impacts. Outside, students from a dozen worlds walked across the campus quad, their conversations mixing languages that had never been spoken together before the war. She thought about the ordinary Tuesday afternoon when her biggest worry had been staying awake during a physics lecture. That girl seemed like a different person now, someone from a simpler time, when humanity's greatest challenges were local and individual rather than galactic and species-wide. But Maya realized that the transformation had not changed the fundamental truth about human nature. When faced with impossible odds, people found ways to make the impossible possible. The scale had changed, but the principle remained the same.